A mysterious island. A plane crash. Explosions. This is my most ambitious diorama yet. Can you guess what I'm building? That's right. It's the Oceanic Flight 815 crash site from the epic TV series Lost. Oh, and I almost burned my house down making this one. Alright, let's get started on this awesome build. This diorama has a lot going on, from a sandy beach and ocean waves to palm trees and a fully lit up explosion effect. Not to mention a crashed airplane. So the first thing I did was find a 3D model of an airplane. That was harder than you would think. I couldn't find a good Boeing 777 model to 3D print, so I decided to look for an old school glue together model. The next challenge was finding one in a scale small enough for a diorama. After a lot of searching, I found one on eBay that was pretty close to in scale, and since I would be cutting the wing tips off, this would fit my diorama base. But first, trees. Palm trees, to be exact. This is a tropical island after all. And if you want to get specific, it's actually the north shore of Oahu, Hawaii, where the show was filmed. So while I wait for the Boeing model to arrive, I started making palm trees. Using some green forest wire, I cut a few pieces to length. Then I chuck 2 at a time in my drill. Using a pair of pliers to hold the other end, I slowly spin the drill to twist 2 wires into one. The twisted wire pair goes into some modeling clay, and I roll the clay around the wire. This is Play-Doh 101 stuff here. The wire inside will add stiffness later and allows me to bend the trees if needed. Using a wooden knife tool, I cut off the excess, then cut grooves into the tree trunk, which will give them that classic segmented trunk look. Look at those beautiful trunks! While the trunks dry, we can move on to leaves, well, palm fronds. I'm using a paper grocery bag that I sprayed green with cheap craft paint. That I had to thin way too much to get it to spray, which left it too wet and not all that green. So I covered that mess in more green that I brushed onto both sides, which worked better. When dry, the green paper gets folded over on itself and cut so that I have a folded strip that is about ½ an inch wide. Each folded strip will make several palm fronds. Then I repeat that a bunch of times as I have a lot of palm fronds to make. I make a palm frond template using some paper, and I used that template to draw the palm frond shape onto my green folded strips. That shape then gets cut out over and over and over and over again. And each one of those then gets a bunch of side cuts to create all the tiny leaflets that make up the palm frond. I then use a small round tool and open the palm frond over it to give it a curviness that I like. And there you go, a completed palm frond. Only 100 or so more to go, but that's it. But at least I found better leaflet cutting scissors. Thank goodness. So, cut like crazy, unfold the frond around a curved item, and Bob's your uncle. Cool, right? My trunks are done drying, so time to paint them with a tan color for a base coat. Once that dried, I went over the tan with a dark brown wash to give them a layered look. Tree assembly just requires some tacky glue and some twine, or string if you don't have twine. I put some tacky glue on the top of the trunk, then started gluing the fronds into place. I work around the trunk and keep going around to layer a bunch of fronds on. Then apply some tacky glue to the base of the leaves and wrap some twine around them. I added a brown wash over the twine off camera to add a bit more realism that you can't see here just yet. Pretty cool technique, right? Well, look at that. My Boeing 777 model finally arrived. I cut the pieces off the sprues, sand off burrs, and then wash the pieces with some soapy water so paint sticks better. And salad spread works great for this. The fuselage snaps together easily. Nice and beefy. Time to free the wings. And all of the pieces are cut off now. But I need to get started on the base, and the first piece I need is a battery box to hold the batteries that will power the LED noodle for the explosion effects. Some scrap cardboard and hot glue will do the job. I think all of the palm fronds have made me a little delirious. I finished up the battery box and cut a hunk of 1/2 inch thick MDF off camera for the base. Some more hot glue attaches the battery box to the base. Pretty simple. The next step is to get messy with some Sculpt-A-Mold, but before I do, I prime the cardboard battery box so that the water in the Sculpt-A-Mold doesn't soak in too much. Nothing but the finest equipment here. Time for a little brush repair. The exact formula for mixing Sculpt-A-Mold is a huge secret, but I'm going to share it with you now, so grab a pencil and take notes. Put Sculpt-A-Mold in a container and add some water. Too dry? Add some more water. Too wet? Just add some more Sculpt-A-Mold. Too much dust? Spritz on some water from a spray bottle. It's pretty hard to go wrong with this stuff. Just mix until it feels like Play-Doh. Turns out gloves actually make it harder to work into place. Just pat it down, spread it out, and keep doing that until you get the look you want. I did learn from experience here that Sculpt-A-Mold placed directly on MDF isn't a great idea. The MDF soaks up the water, as MDF loves to do, and then decided to warp my base a little. Priming the MDF first should help with that. Live and learn. While I have the Sculpt-A-Mold out, I put some in this container lid, which I'll use for a paint and epoxy test later. Now to the ground, which is a sandy island beach, a more sand-like color. This is just a base coat, so no white shows through the sand that comes later. Back to the lid test. I painted on some sand base color here, and a few blue and green colors to test how they look through the epoxy. Much easier to test this out here rather than on the diorama. A little epoxy dye, a good mix, and then pour. Then I do it all again because I didn't mix enough. That's the curse of epoxy. You either make way too much or not nearly enough. What the mother piece of bull is this? The underside of my base grew mold because the Sculpt-A-Mold soaked in and, well, got all funky on me. This is the bottom of the base, so I'll just use IPA to clean it up. I'm sure that will kill it. Aww. Or feed it until it becomes sentient. Time will tell. Well, it's just one more reason to prime your MDF, I guess. This corner of the base will become ocean water, thus all the epoxy testing. So I'm painting on a gradient of dark blue to lighter blues and teals to simulate the color of the ocean depths. I then remembered I needed to run some wires for the explosion effect, which I forgot to do earlier. So I got the drill out, started on a downward direction, and then slowly tilt the drill to go horizontally toward that cardboard battery box I made. Sculpt-A-Mold, thankfully, is very easy to drill through. I cut some wire to length and fed it through the hole. Then decided to pull it out and remove the outer wire jacket as it's thicker than I want. So I feed the wires back in, and yeah, that is much better. Using a screwdriver in a way I'm sure it shouldn't be used, I carve a little channel out for the wires to hide in. Safety third! Then a little modeling paste to hide them and some touch of paint off camera. Let's pour a beach! I use Oceanic glue, which is just watered down PVA glue and a drop of dish soap, and sprayed the areas where I want the sand to stick. The sand itself is just a tan colored tile grout, which I sifted onto place. Very easy, very realistic. The ocean will be an epoxy pour, so I need to seal the edges, and I saw somebody else using glue and packing tape to do this. Seemed like a good idea, so I tried it. Not a good idea. It was annoying and fiddly, but it sort of became one of those things where you're just so committed to making something work that you aren't thinking straight. I spent more time gluing and re-gluing the tape on, and trying to get my various weights in place to hold it while the glue dried, that I wasn't seeing the obvious situation of this just is not working well. Sometimes it takes another person to walk in and say, "Why don't you just use some acrylic sheets and hot glue them to the base?" Oh! So I had Captain Obvious cut some acrylic strips and I attached them with hot glue. Oh, hot. A little extra glue for good measure. Much better. Onto the epoxy pour. I put the base on a cafeteria tray in case there are any leaks. A few drops of dark blue and a few drops of light blue. Then mix up the epoxy and pour into place. Carefully torch off any air bubbles and you're good to go. The next day it was dry, so I used some IPA spray, which I guess is supposed to help loosen hot glue according to YouTube. Then peel off the acrylic sides. And there you go, an ocean is created. The epoxy sides were clean and flat, but I didn't like how it met the MDF base, so I filled in some areas with modeling paste and painted them blue. Not the best solution, but this is my first epoxy water attempt, so live and learn. Let's get some black 1.0 on the sides while I'm here. Why not? I bought some of this water ripple effect stuff, which is like a clear gel product to help make ripples and waves in water. So I smeared some on, and then I used a paintbrush to move it around for ocean waves. And here's how it looks. Better than I expected. Once that was dry, I just painted on some white acrylic paint with a fairly dry brush to create that whitewater look you see on ocean waves. In the first episode of Lost, there are a couple of massive explosions that take place. The first big one is when some poor guy walks too close to a still running jet engine, gets sucked in and causes it to explode. The second big one is on the other side of the plane and almost kills off our main characters right off the bat. This is the fireball explosion I will be making. Stick around to see how I almost burned down my house.
What?
But first, I need to solder a tiny LED noodle onto the wires I ran earlier. That noodle will get wrapped in cotton from a cotton ball. I just pull the cotton ball apart like this, which makes a big mess. Nope. Take two. I unroll the cotton ball like this to make sheets of cotton instead. Ah yes, much better. I wrap that around the LED in sort of an emoji poop swirl type thing. I used a little glue and the end of a brush as not to glue my fingers to the cotton, and eventually got a shape I liked. But it had a lot of stray cotton hairs all over the place, so I thought a super fast pass with my torch would be a good idea. I mean, what could go wrong? Oh yeah, that's what could go wrong.
What are you doing?
Not my best move ever. So I removed the freshly toasted cotton and added in some new, less stinky cotton, just like I did before, along with a quick light test. I used some plastic wrap to protect the diorama, while leaving the cotton exposed so I could airbrush on some yellow, orange, and red paint. Then a little misting with some black paint to give it that sooty look. Time to get back to the plane, which also needs plane parts that didn't come with my model, like the interior. So I had him 3D print some airplane seats, luggage, and various bits of debris, along with some in-scale people, because they are insanely expensive to buy, yet virtually free to print. I even printed Vincent, the dog, which you can see here. The nice thing about painting a crash site is that the paint job doesn't need to be perfect, and should really be sort of rough and sloppy, because all of this stuff would be in really rough shape. I only had a few different suitcase models, but I printed a bunch of each and then used different colors on them to create more variety. Looking good, Vincent! More of the plane bits need paint as well. And when I find a bunch of the same small parts, like these wheels, I just leave them on the sprue and get an assembly line going. Paint the same area of each wheel, then flip it over and do it all again. Let's roll through some debris painting goodness now. Alright, let's work on the fuselage now. Since this is Oceanic 815, I need to match their look as best as I can. So using some mini masking tape, as small as 1 millimeter wide, I mask off the plane to paint in crisp stripes. First the pink stripe, and then the light blue stripe, and finally the dark blue stripe. Now, here's your moment of satisfaction. Ooh, yeah, peel that tape off. That's right, I know what you like. I did the same thing on a chunk of the plane that's separated from the main body. Time to assemble the plane model bits that I painted earlier, like the landing gear. I also distressed a lot of the plane bits with a black wash to make them look a bit more distressed and burned up. Even the interior of the fuselage needs some color to it. The engines needed to be painted, then black washed a bit too. Painting those tiny people was not the most fun I've ever had. So tiny. It's time for some decals, like these water slide window decals that came with the model. Soak them in water and slide them right off and onto the model, and they're pretty easy to move around for a bit until they dry. And a quick note on the Oceanic logo you see here. I don't know how I forgot to record that process, but I guess I did. I traced the real logo in my 3D software, then printed the logo at 0.1 millimeters tall. So basically, like thin paper that can contour around the fuselage. Then I painted each letter and glued them on. It worked really well. I'm doing a dry fit of the fuselage here, and then I'm going to brush on a black wash. This plane has had a rough day, so this black wash really helps add in scratches, soot, and general wear and tear. I cut some random tiny wires I had laying around to be part of the electric system of the plane. The plane needs an interior, and while I printed the seats, I still need a floor for the seats to sit on. An old plastic lid should work. I made some marks and cut out a rectangle to fit inside the plane. A quick test fit. Yep, looks good. And a quick sanding to help paint stick. Then some black paint. Now the fiddly work of gluing passengers into their seats and the seats to the floor. But I need more debris. There should be fabric and clothing and all the stuff that would burst out of luggage in a situation like this. I saw this technique on another channel a while back, not sure which one, where they used tin foil to make super tiny cloth and paper debris. Painting the foil doesn't work well, but if you coat it with PVA glue, you can then paint on the dried PVA glue. I decided to do this as one large piece of aluminum foil, or aluminium for our UK friends. so that I could use this on mini dioramas to come. I painted a bunch of different colors for variety. While the tinfoil dries, I can hot glue in the interior floor and seats. Now that my tinfoil is dry, I just cut out tiny little shapes that would be random debris bits. I can then glue these bits into the plane and all over the beach to look like random debris. Since the plane crashed upside down on the beach, all of the passengers left in seats will be hanging upside down. That also means all of that luggage in the cargo area is upside down too, so the ceiling of the luggage compartment is now the floor. So I glued a bunch of luggage and debris there. You won't see most of this once it gets assembled, but it really needed something inside. I'm using some modeling paste here to fill in the seams of the fuselage, and some more bits to glue together, and it's starting to look like a proper plane wreck. And now we get to the best part of the build, final assembly. All of those palm trees needed to get planted. This is pretty easy to do. Just drill a hole in the sculpting mold, add some glue, and pop in a tree. If the tree is too long, just cut the end off to shorten it. A few bushes sprinkled around for added detail. I used some glue and extra sand, which is just my tile grout again, to cover the area where the trees go into the ground. The plane finally gets glued to the base. And a few more bushes. This guy gets glued down. And some landing gear glues down, crushing him in place. Poor guy will never know the mysteries that the island had to offer. Not to mention how he lost out on lost royalties by never making it beyond episode 1. I need to add in some of the main cast members where the explosion that almost kills them will be. Don't worry, you'll see a better shot of them in just a bit. The last remaining bodies and survivors and debris get glued into place. And I'm done. Now let's see how it looks. This one was super fun to make, and I actually learned so much in the process. Making custom palm trees was fun, and I think they turned out really well. And doing an epoxy water feature was so cool and easier than I expected. Sure, the area where epoxy connects to the base isn't ideal, and my fix wasn't great, but now I know what to look out for in the future builds. That explosion is incredible. I couldn't be happier with it. Well, I mean, I could if I hadn't almost burned down my house making it, but otherwise, it's perfect. I hope you enjoyed this and are inspired to make your own thing. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and a comment. Thank you so much for watching.